Panzer III was the common name of a medium tank that was developed in the 1930s by Germany and was used extensively in World War II. The official German designation was Panzerkampfwagen III Sd Kfz 141, translating as armoured fighting vehicle. It was intended to fight other armoured fighting vehicles and serve alongside the infantry supporting Panzer IV. However, as the Germans faced the formidable T-34, stronger anti-tank guns were needed. Since the Panzer IV had a bigger turret ring, the role was reversed. The Panzer IV mounted the long-barreled 7.5 cm Kw-K40 gun and engaged in tank-to-tank battles. The Panzer III became obsolete in this role and for most purposes was supplanted by the Panzer IV. From 1942, the last version of Panzer III mounted the 7.5 cm Kw-K37L/24, better suited for infantry support. Production of the Panzer III ended in 1943. However, the Panzer III's capable chassis provided hulls for the Sturmgeschütz III until the end of the war. Development history: on January 11, 1934, following specifications laid down by Heinz Guderian, the Army Weapons Department drew up plans for a medium tank with a maximum weight of 24,000 kilograms and a top speed of 35 kilometers per hour. It was intended as the main tank of the German panzer divisions, capable of engaging and destroying opposing tank forces. At the time, it was widely held that tanks would be used in two ways: supporting infantry against other infantry and in direct combat against other tanks and lighter vehicles. It was the infantry, in prepared defenses and equipped with anti-tank guns, that presented the biggest threat to armor. Tanks designed to operate with friendly infantry against the enemy generally carried more armor and were heavier. A separate class, known as cruisers or mediums, were intended to exploit gaps in the enemy lines where opposition had been removed, moving through and attacking the enemy's unprotected lines of communication and the rear areas. These designs were lighter and faster. The PZ-III was built to this lighter standard, and was intended to be paired with the Panzer IV, who would handle the infantry tank role. Daimler-Benz, Krupp, MAN, and Rheinmetall all produced prototypes. Testing of these took place in 1936 and 1937, leading to the Daimler-Benz design being chosen for production. The first model of the Panzer III, the Ausf 1/4 Rung A, came off the assembly line in May 1937. 2 of which were unarmed, were produced in that year. Mass production of the AUSF F version began in 1939. Between 1937 and 1940, attempts were made to standardize parts between Krupp's Panzer IV and Daimler-Benz's Panzer III. Much of the early development work on the Panzer III was a quest for a suitable suspension. Several varieties of leaf spring suspensions were tried on AUSF A through AUSF D before the torsion bar suspension of the AUSF E was standardized. The Panzer III, along with the Soviet KV heavy tank, was one of the first tanks to use this suspension design. A distinct feature of Panzer III, influenced by British Vickers tanks, was the three-man turret. This meant that the commander was not distracted with another role in the tank and could fully concentrate on maintaining awareness of the situation and directing the tank. Most tanks of the time did not have this capability, providing the Panzer III with a potential combat advantage. For example, the French Somme S-35 only had a one-man turret crew, and the Soviet T-34 had 2 men. The practical importance of this feature is signified by the fact that not only all the further German tank designs inherited it, but also later into the war, most of the Allied tanks' designs either quickly switched to the three-man turret, or were abandoned as obsolete. The Panzer III, as opposed to Panzer IV, had no turret basket, merely a footrest platform for the gunner. The Panzer III was intended as the primary battle tank of the German forces. However, when it initially met the KV-1 and T-34 tanks, it proved to be inferior in both armor and gun power. To meet the growing need to counter these tanks, the Panzer III was upgunned with a longer, more powerful 50mm cannon and received more armor, although this failed to effectively address the problem caused by KV tank designs. As a result, production of self-propelled guns, as well as the upgunning of the Panzer IV was initiated. In 1942, the final version of the Panzer III, the AUSF-N, was created with a 75mm Kpfw-37L/24 cannon, a low-velocity gun designed for anti-infantry and close support work. For defensive purposes, the AUSF-N was equipped with rounds of hollow charge ammunition which could penetrate 70 to 100 mm of armor depending on the round's variant, but these were strictly used for self-defense. The Japanese government bought 2 Panzer IIIs from their German allies during the war. Purportedly this was for reverse engineering purposes, since Japan put more emphasis on the development of new military aircraft and naval technology and had been dependent on European influence in designing new tanks. By the time the vehicles were delivered, the Panzer III's technology was obsolete. Armor: the Panzer III AUSF III had 15mm of homogeneous steel armor on all sides with 10mm on the top and 5mm on the bottom. This was quickly determined to be insufficient, and was upgraded to 30mm on the front, sides and rear in the AUSF D, E, F, and G models, with the H model having a second 30mm layer of face-hardened steel applied to the front and rear hull. The AUSF J model had a solid 50mm plate on the front and rear, while the AUSF JA to the first, L, and the M models had an additional layer of 20mm of armor on the front hull and turret. This additional frontal armor gave the Panzer III frontal protection from most British and Soviet anti-tank guns at all but close ranges. The sides were still vulnerable to many enemy weapons, including anti-tank rifles at close ranges. Armament: the Panzer III was intended to fight other tanks. In the initial design stage a 50mm cannon was specified. However, the infantry at the time were being equipped with a 37mm Pak 36, and it was thought that, in the interest of standardization, the tanks should carry the same armament. As a compromise, the turret ring was made large enough to accommodate a 50mm cannon should a future upgrade be required. This single decision would later assure the Panzer III a prolonged life in the German army. The AUSF to early AUSF F were equipped with a 3.7 cm Kpfw-36L/45, which proved adequate during the campaigns of 1939 and 1940, but the later AUSF F to AUSF J were upgraded with the 5 cm Kpfw-38L/42 and the AUSF JA to the first 2M with the longer 5 cm Kpfw-39L/60 cannon in response to increasingly better armed and armored opponents. By 1942, the Panzer IV was becoming Germany's main medium tank because of its better upgrade potential. The Panzer III remained in production as a close support vehicle. The AUSF AN model mounted a low-velocity 7.5 cm Kpfw-37L/24 cannon, the same used by the early Panzer IV AUSF to AUSF F models. These guns had originally been fitted to older Panzer IV AUSF A to F1 models and had been placed into storage when those tanks had also been up-armed to longer versions of the 75mm gun. All early models up to and including the AUSF F had two 7.92mm Maschinengewehr 34 machine guns mounted coaxially with the main gun, and a similar weapon in a hull mount. Models from the AUSF G and later had a single coaxial MG34 and the hull MG34. Mobility: the Panzer III AUSF III were powered by a 250 PS, 12-cylinder Maybach L108 engine, giving a top speed of 32 km/h and a range of 150 km. All later models were powered by the 300 PS, 12-cylinder Maybach L120 engine. Top speed varied, depending on the transmission and weight, but was around 40 km/h. The range was generally around 155 km. Combat use: the Panzer III was used in the campaigns against Poland, France, the Soviet Union and in North Africa. A handful were still in use in Normandy, NCO, Norway, Finland and in Operation Market Garden in 1944. In the Polish and French campaigns, the Panzer III formed a small part of the German armoured forces. Only a few hundred AUSF A through F were available in these campaigns, most armed with a 37mm gun. They were the best medium tank available to the Germans and outclassed in both firepower and armour most of their opponents, such as the Polish 7TP, French F-35 and H-35 light tanks and the Soviet T-26 light tank and BT cavalry tanks. Around the time of Operation Barbarossa, the Panzer III was numerically the most important German tank. At this time, the majority of the available tanks had the 50mm KWK-38L/42 cannon, which also equipped the majority of the tanks in North Africa. Initially, the Panzer IIIs were outclassed and outnumbered by Soviet T-34 and KV tanks. However, the most numerous Soviet tanks were the T-26 and BT tanks. This, along with superior German tactical skill, crew training, and the good ergonomics of the Panzer III all contributed to a rough 6:1 favorable kill ratio for German tanks of all types in 1941. With the appearance of the T-34 and KV tanks, rearming the Panzer III with a longer, more powerful 50mm cannon was prioritized. The T-34 was generally invulnerable in frontal engagements with the Panzer III until the 50mm KWK-39L/60 gun was introduced on the Panzer III AUSF. JAR to the first in the spring of 1942. This could penetrate the T-34 frontally at ranges under 500 meters. Against the KV tanks, it was a threat if armed with special high-velocity tungsten rounds. In addition, to counter anti-tank rifles, in 1943 the AUSF air version began the use of spaced armor skirts around the turret and on the hull sides. However, due to the introduction of the outgunned and up-armored Panzer IV, the Panzer III was, after the Battle of Kursk, relegated to secondary roles, such as training, and it was replaced as the main German medium tank by the Panzer IV and the Panther. The Panzer III chassis was the basis for the turretless Sturmgeschütz I/4 TZ3 assault gun, one of the most successful self-propelled guns of the war, and the single most produced German armoured fighting vehicle design of World War II. By the end of the war, the PzD had almost no frontline use and many vehicles had been returned to the factories for conversion into Sturge assault guns, which were in high demand due to the defensive warfare style adopted by the German army by then. Variants and production, Panzer III AUSF. A prototype. Only 8 armed and saw service in Poland. Armed with 3.7 cm KWK-36L/46.5 main gun, 250 PS Lag 108 engine. Panzer III AUSF. B. Prototype. Some saw service in Poland. Panzer III AUSF. C. Prototype. Some saw service in Poland. Panzer III AUSF. D. Prototype. Some saw service in Poland and Norway. Panzer III AUSF. E. Suspension redesigned, switching from leaf springs to torsion bars, now using 6 larger road wheels per side. 300 PS Lag 120 engine. Panzer III AUSF. F. Improved AUSF. E. First mass production version, late production armed with 5 cm KWK-38L/42 main gun. Panzer III AUSF. G. More armor on gun mantlet. Armed with 3.7 cm KWK-36L/46.5 gun. Panzer III AUSF. H. 5 cm KWK-38L/42 as standard gun. Bolt-on armor added to front and rear hull. Panzer III AUSF. I. Variant mentioned in Allied intelligence reports but not an actual existing vehicle. Possible confusion with AUSF. J. Panzer III AUSF. J. Hull and turret front armor increased to solid 50mm plate. Some were produced with 5 cm KWK-39L/60 gun and later redesignated AUSF. L. Panzer III AUSF. K. Panzerkampfwagen Command tank variant with a modified turret. Carried actual main armament rather than a dummy gun as found on other Panzer III command versions. Panzer III AUSF. L. Redesignated OS. J. Equipped with long 5 cm gun, 20 ohm stand-off armor plates on hull and turret front, Panzer III AUSF. M. Minor modifications of the AUSF. L. Such as deep wading exhaust and shear 1/4 as inside armor panels. Panzer III AUSF. N. Infantry support tank, armed with a short-barreled 7.5 cm KWK-37L/24 gun. Designs based on chassis, Panzerkampfwagen Gen III, Ford artillery observer tank. 262 converted from older Panzer III AUSF. E2H, Panzer III, in 1944, 176 Panzer IIIs were converted to armored recovery vehicles. Mostly issued to formations with Tiger I tanks. Panzer III AUSF. M/Panzer III, flamethrower tank. 100 built on new AUSF. M chassis. Minute recurrency Armour 3, minute clearing vehicle based on a Panzer III chassis with a very highly raised suspension. Panzerkampfwagen III, command tank with long-range radios. AUSF. D, E and H, dummy main gun. AUSF. J and K, armed with 5 cm gun. Sturmgeschütz III 1/4 TZ-33B, a close support assault gun. Armed with a 15 cm SIG-33, 24 built. 12 used and lost in Stalingrad. Sturmgeschütz 1/4 TZ-3, assault gun tank destroyer armed with a 75 mm to K. The Soviet Su-76I self-propelled gun was based on the chassis of captured German Panzer III and Sturm III. About 201 of these vehicles, many captured in the Battle of Stalingrad, were converted at Factory No. 37 in 1943 for Red Army service by removing the turret, constructing a fixed casemate, and installing a 76.2 mm S1 gun in a limited traverse mount. The armor was 35 mm thick on the casemate front, 50 mm in the hull front, and 30 mm on the hull side. It was issued to tank and self-propelled gun units starting in autumn 1943, and withdrawn to training use in early 1944. 2 Su-76I survive, one on a monument in the Ukrainian town of Sarny and a second on display in a museum on Poklonnaya Hill in Moscow. It should not be confused with the Soviet Su-76 series. Panzer III, some tanks were converted to amphibious tanks for Operation Sea Lion. Unusually, they were designed to be able to stay underwater rather than to float. The idea was that they would be launched near to the invasion shore and then drive to dry land on the sea bottom. The tank was waterproofed, the exhaust was fitted with a one-way valve and air intake was through a hose. See also: Comparison of early World War II tanks, Panzer III-IV, tanks of comparable role, performance and era, Matilda-year British equivalent, M3 American equivalent, T-28 a Soviet equivalent, Type 1 Chihei Japanese equivalent. References, citations. Bibliography: Germany's Panzerkampfwagen III, Sd Kfz 141. World War II vehicles. Retrieved June 10, 2004, PzKpfw III. Achtung Panzer. Retrieved June 12, 2007, PzKpfw. Panzer World. Retrieved April 19, 2005, Gander, Terry J. Tanks in Detail. PzKpfw III AUSF to NISBN 0-7110-3015-4. Zalaga, Stephen J. Japanese Tanks 1939-45. Osprey. PA 48. ISBN A1-84603-091-9. Zalaga, Stephen J. T-34 76th medium tank 1941–1945. Great Britain, Osprey. PA-48. ISBN A1-85532-382-6. Zaliger, Stephen J., James Grandson. Soviet Tanks and Combat Vehicles of World War II, London, Arms and Armour Press. ISBN 0-85368-606-8. External links, AFV database, Surviving Panzer III tanks, a PDF file presenting the Panzer III tanks still existing in the world.